Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks again for joining our Zoom call. You are at a workforce webinar in partnership with the Minneapolis Regional Chamber and AARP. We're super excited to be here with you guys today. We're going to be talking about the Secure Choice Act. For those of you that I don't know, thanks for being here. My name's Maddie. I'm a workforce program manager with the Minneapolis Regional Chamber. I'm going to kind of serve as our guide, our moderator for today. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get into kind of the core of our program is you should, as a participant and as a panelist, if you're interested in using the Q&A function, feel free to use that at any time. We have a little bit of an agenda that we'll be working through, but if questions come through, I'll be monitoring those just to make sure that if you're on the call today really looking for specific like answers to questions, or maybe you're a business owner and you're really looking to get or provide feedback, on the Secure Choice Act, that we can address that where possible. So the Q&A function is available to you, as well as the chat function. You should be able to chat anybody on the call, myself or the panelists directly, and I'll be monitoring that as well. As I noted before, I kind of started our formal introduction, this is being recorded. So if you're watching this on playback, hello. You'll be able to see some of, if there's any like links that are discussed or contact information, we'll be posting that in the description below here on YouTube for you to reference while you're watching through. So, well, thanks so much again for everybody being here today, and excited for our panelists to be with us. Like we said, this is a Minneapolis Regional Chamber offering, and we're doing this in partnership and in sponsorship with AARP Minnesota, which led the efforts at the Minnesota legislature to pass the Secure Choice program in 2023. And the chamber was really proud to endorse this exciting legislation. A little bit about our panelists, just to provide a bit of an overview. I'm sure that they'll get into the depth of their experience and how long they've been working on this piece of legislation, but we've got a panel of experts here to discuss the Secure Choice program. And it's an easy plug and play retirement option that allows your employees to save for the future. If you saw some of the kind of advertisements for this event, you probably saw some statistics about how important it is to provide an option like this for individuals in the state of Minnesota to begin saving for their retirement. So we will also have a question and answer session, like we said, and if you have questions throughout, I think we can accommodate those. And we want to make sure that your input is included to ensure that Minnesota succeeds in rolling out the program. So a little bit about who we have on the call besides myself. We've got Aaron Leonard. I'm a Secure Choice board member and executive director of the Minnesota Retirement System. If you want to give a little wave, Aaron. Thank you. And then Susan, who's the executive director of the Legislative Commission on Pensions and Retirement. We've also got Mary Jo here with AARP. She's the Associate State Director of Advocacy. And last but not least, we've got Eric Forsberg, who's the owner of Devil's Advocate Restaurants. So welcome everybody. I think probably at this time, I'm just minding the chat here. Looks good. That we'll go ahead and get started because I know we have a lot to discuss. So we felt in sort of our prep conversations for today's webinar that it'd be important for us to talk a little bit about the Secure Choice Act and what really is the problem that we're trying to solve with this piece of legislation. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary Jo to kind of get us started, and then we'll hear a little bit more from Aaron, just kind of providing maybe some pieces that maybe Mary Jo left open for her, or just kind of giving us a bit of an overview of really what it looks like kind of in the hard details. So Mary Jo, I'll turn it to
Well,
you.
great. Well, thank you, Maddie. And we're very happy to be a co-sponsor of this event and really support and are thankful for your support for the Secure Choice. So ARP had been working on this legislation in the state for nearly a decade. And the problem really that we're trying to solve is that today Minnesota and much of the nation faces a vast retirement savings deficit. This means that many people are not saving enough for their future, that we really are concerned that people will not be able to retire in dignity. It's estimated, for example, let me give you some statistics. It's estimated that nearly half of Americans nearing retirement age, 65 years old, have less than 25,000 put away, and while 1 in 4 have less than $1,000 in savings. So really, at this rate, we're very concerned that many middle class income families are not going to have enough money to pay for their basic necessities. But the good news is that we can get ahead of this problem if we can improve access to employer based savings plans, because really they are key and critical in ensuring that people can save. In fact, it's workers are 20 times more likely to save for their retirement if they can do it automatically out of their paycheck. And in Minnesota, unfortunately, we have about 32% of our workers that do not have a retirement plan. That's about over 700,000 workers. So that's why we passed Secure Choice. And as you said, Maddie, it's a simple plug and play option for employers, because we have heard, it's very costly for employers to do it on their own. And I think you'll hear from Eric, just about that. And it can be very much of an administrative burden. So I'm excited that we're here today, and we're going to learn a little bit more about the program, when we expect it to launch, some of the obligations that employers will play as we look at rolling out this program. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, Erin, I think if you're able to come off mute and just provide a little bit more of an overview of really what the Secure Choice program is, including its benefits and how it works, and then we'll hear a little bit more from Eric and the perspective from the employer.
Sure. So the Minnesota Secure Choice Retirement Program was established in law, as Mary Jo mentioned. It's really intended to provide it's a mandatory option for employers to provide a retirement plan. So like she mentioned, 32% of Minnesotans do not have access to a retirement plan, and statistics show that improving that access will improve their overall retirement savings in the future. The program itself, it has a board of directors that oversees the rules governing the program. We just started implementing the program this year. As far as the board being appointed, it took about a year for that to take place. And the goal is it'll be an auto IRA program, so folks will contribute up to, currently the rate is $7,500 a year. The board will establish the mandatory rate of contribution to the auto IRA program. The board will also select the investment options, and the great news about that is that with a scale like that will be part of this program, we will be able to offer these investment options for very low fees and hopefully low cost to those participants. And all of that needs to be determined over the next several years. We fortunately have other states in the nation that have established these programs, and we can look to their experience. There's actually 7 states that have programs up and running. The first was Oregon Saves in 2017, and those 7 states have over $1.4 billion already set aside for participants for their future retirement. So the nuts and bolts, a lot of the details are to be determined yet, but we have some great guidance from other states to get us moving.
Awesome. Did you want to share a couple statistics about just kind of maybe some of the success that we're seeing amongst the states that have similar programs?
Sure. I think I'm going to reference Oregon Saves quite often just because
Sure.
they've been established the longest. And since there was some hesitation about these programs, and employers don't want mandates, which we completely understand. But the overall experience, Pew actually did a survey of employers in Oregon to ask them about their experience with the program. And over 70% had a positive or neutral experience with the program. And 80% there was no cost associated with establishing the program. And over 70% of folks actually did also have they had very few employee questions. So most of those did get filtered through the Secure Choice Program administration. And which I think when we have hesitation and see such good results as far as a neutral or satisfied experience, we're really hoping to leverage some of those experiences here in Minnesota.
Awesome. Okay. Great. And yes, I do believe, Erin, you mentioned something that maybe Susan, you can kind of chime in on, or anybody on the call, I guess, can too, of just, really when we were thinking about pulling together today's program and sharing kind of initial information, we did really want to highlight a bit of an asterisk or a caveat about really where we're at in the process. And Erin, I don't know if you want to kind of paint a picture of like, if you're thinking of it in like, one of those like measuring bars, right? Like where are we? And what's the time frame for this legislation going into effect?
So the board was established just this spring. We've only had 2 meetings. Our first goals were to set up, get an office established, an interim executive director named. Unfortunately, we've done those things. Our next step is to get a permanent executive director in place, so a retirement professional who's experienced with community outreach, as well as has a background in these types of programs or some sort of retirement plan administration. We're hoping to have that completed by March of next year. We are in the process of establishing a website, so communication is going to be critical in establishing this program and making sure that we are the staff is clear in the communication, it's understandable, employers know what the expectations are for their role, as well as the future participants in the program. And we don't anticipate being able to accept contributions until 2026. So probably first quarter of 2026, and likely a phased in approach. So that is all to be determined, but we will likely phase in the program based on the size of the employer and or the type of employer. We have a lot of data gathering and outreach that will need to take place. Our immediate needs are getting that communication website developed so that folks have a way to reach and share their information. And then we do have some mandatory provisions that were in the law that requires us to go to the legislature. And Susan might be able to talk a little bit more about those, but that we're working on before the 2025 legislative session.
Okay. Fantastic. Yeah, Susan. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mary Jo. I see you
Well,
wanna come in.
Maddie, and Erin, I think that's a great overview. The one thing I just wanted to say is, just to be clear, the law does prescribe that employers who, with 5 or more employees, would be required to, transmit some of the payrolls for their workers into the retirement account at the state. So I just want to make that clear, just because I think some very smaller businesses were concerned about that.
And I think
Yeah.
it's important to note it's only if they don't have a retirement plan already. So if
Yeah.
you already offer a retirement
Yeah.
plan to your employees, this will not be a mandatory requirement.
Exactly.
And it will be voluntary if you do have fewer than 5, but we'll probably start with those mandatory folks first.
Awesome. Yeah, no, Mary Jo, appreciated that. I wanted to make sure we got to that point as well, because that was certainly maybe some of the central tenets of questions that we were getting regarding this piece of legislation. So appreciate that. Susan, I want to make sure to bring you into the conversation kind of more in the details area. Can you provide a little bit more detail about the program that you don't think has been mentioned yet? Or do we know much about maybe, for instance, like the contribution rate? What happens to the payroll deduction contribution once it gets there, and maybe just a little bit more insight into if an employer doesn't want to contribute, what may that process look like?
Yeah, thanks, Maddie. Happy to provide a little bit more. I will note, though, if I could, just clarify something. I have gotten many questions from small businesses about a date that's in the act that says January 1, 2025. This misunderstanding, I just want to note, the law says that the program cannot open until January 1, 2025 or later. And as Erin just went through, the program is just getting started here in terms of, sort of the back of the scenes, or back of the, all of the stuff that needs to happen before we're ready to roll out a program. So, and then after that, it needs to be rolled out over a 2-year period. So it'll be done in two or more phases over a 2-year period, whenever that, the first phase starts. So just to be clear, no need for rushing into, say, purchasing a 401k plan off the shelf with a provider or something like that. This will take a bit, and there will be a communication effort to inform everybody. But to go back, Maddie, to your question, So we don't have any information to share at this point about what the initial contribution rate is. States around the country are, we're looking at sort of 5% being an initial contribution, but it could be 3 or 4 or something more than that. But most likely 5 or less is going to be the contribution rate that the board will settle on. And then after that, annually, there will be an auto escalation. So it will go up by probably a percentage each year until a maximum that also, again, will be set by the board. Just in case there's anybody feeling like this is, you know, they're going to be forced into something, again, employees can always opt out, or they can reduce their level of contributions. So if they want to stay at, you know, 3%, they can do that. And then to the point of what happens when the money hits the state, Aaron also mentioned that it will be deposited into an IRA, individual retirement account, in the name of the employee. And then the employee will be able to direct the investment into investment funds that are going to be selected with oversight from the board and the State Board of Investment. So those funds will be kind of an array of, you know, with different risk profiles, but the employees will be able to elect where they want their funds to be invested.
Awesome. Well, that's super helpful. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about clarity around if an employer is thinking to themselves, well, I know I already offer something, but I want to make sure if there's something that I need to do to let the state know that I offer, like, can you say a little bit more about that process?
Thanks, Maddie. We're really again at the preliminary stages, and so the board will be setting up the program. A lot of these details have to be decided. The way other states are doing it is they're having some kind of a certification process where they send in a form that they fill out indicating that they have a retirement plan, and that's why they feel they do not need to participate in the plan. So the law, though, if an employer says, well, too bad, I don't have a plan, I don't want to participate, down the road, there will likely be penalties
Okay.
that can be imposed, and that will then be enforceable by the AG, most likely. Those again, though, need to be developed by the board. The board is to provide some penalty guidance or really a recommendation to the legislature before the start of this next session.
Okay.
But for the first year that there are penalties in place, they cannot be imposed again under the act for the first year. So employers will get warnings. So there'll be plenty
Okay.
of time to comply.
Okay. That's fantastic. One question that popped up for me, maybe anybody can take this one, is regarding the communication strategy. I think, you know, sometimes what happens, and we're really happy to be the conduit, is a lot of people will come to the chamber because they just don't really know where to look for information online. And we're more than happy to direct them to where they need to be. But any insights into if this will be like featured on, Aaron, on your department's page, or like where you're maybe thinking of putting it?
So it will, like right now we've been using the Minnesota LCPR website to
Okay.
share information regarding meetings, the meeting content. Once we get the Secure Choice website established, we'll be sure to get Susan that information so she can direct folks and other stakeholders who are interested so that they can go directly to the website. We're also in the process, I don't know if you're familiar with GovDelivery or Granicus.
Sure.
So we're likely going to engage with GovDelivery or Granicus so that folks can sign up to receive updates. And we'll make
Awesome.
sure to work with stakeholders like the Minneapolis Regional Chamber and ARP so that they can get this information to employers. And we're looking to other state agencies potentially to get employer contact information to do some proactive communication. Once we get an executive director permanently, our first hire will likely be a communications stakeholder engagement specialist so that we
Okay.
are sure to communicate frequently, but also clearly so that folks know what the expectations are.
That's awesome. Okay. That's super helpful for me because, yeah, as somewhat of a resource gatherer, I want to make sure I kind of am like keeping my eye up and really appreciate the Gov delivery system. So yeah, if you're a small business or any size business on the call and you are not engaged with receiving those types of newsletters, highly recommend taking a look at Gov delivery and reading thoroughly your options. There's lots. You could get a newsletter probably every minute of every day if you signed up for all of them, but some of them are certainly incredibly helpful. An additional question before I turn it over to Eric to talk a little bit about why he and his business decided to, support this piece of legislation. I just wanted to ask a question about the board itself. I think, something that we're really trying to do through this webinar is just be as transparent and communicative as possible about where we're at in the process. And I know the hiring for the executive director for this specific program is in the works right now, but can you tell us a little bit about the board and where it's at and the size, and how do people, like, who are these people and how did they get selected?
I can, or Mary Jo, either way, or Susan. Susan was very familiar with the board process, but it's 7 members. So the executive director of the State Board of Investment and the executive director of the Minnesota State Retirement System are statutorily required to participate. We have 3 members that are chosen by the Legislative Commission on Pensions and Retirement. They're executive or operations manager with experience with 401k plans, an executive or operations manager with experience with IRAs, an executive professional in retirement plan investments. So really those areas, they have background, they have expertise in this work. And then there's also 2 governor appointees, which includes a small business owner or nonprofit executive. So there is someone from the small business community on the board, and a human resources professional who has experience with the administering 401k plans. So from that employer perspective as well, with more of an HR lens. So I think it's a good group of people. Everybody's been named. We've had 2 meetings,
Okay.
and everybody's been very engaged in the conversation. They've been positive meetings. But there's a real sensitivity to making sure we're communicating not just to the potential participants, but also the business owners, so that they know what their responsibilities are.
Okay.
And Maddie, I just want to say, one of the things when we did help draft the law is we wanted to make sure that the board did in fact do a lot of outreach to communities of color, because we know that access by retirement plans varies based on race and gender. And we see huge disparities in the savings rates and access to retirement plans for communities of color. So some of the obligation, as Aaron was talking about, is absolutely right, that the board will be doing this communication, but there's a special provision that they do have to do. There's some grant money for them to do some extra outreach in our communities that really need help in terms of retirement savings.
Fantastic. Yeah. And thanks for whoever's using the reactions. We love to see people engaging. So yeah, keep it up, please. Or utilize the Q&A and chat function if you have any questions that you feel like we're not getting to. But yeah, I want to bring Eric, you into the conversation now. And if you were kind of here for the call before the call, you got to hear a little bit about Eric's experience testifying in support of this piece of legislation at the Capitol. But, I guess my central question is just, yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about that experience? Could you tell us how did you get involved with supporting the bill? And from your perspective, really why?
Sure. Well, the bill was brought to me kind of early on in its inception, and something that I was able to give a pretty significant amount of support to in its infancy. With the idea being is that we're pretty uniquely situated, being in the hospitality industry, that we employ a lot of people that this will affect, probably more so than probably any other industry. When we talk about underserved communities, we talk about single mothers, when we talk about, we're the largest employer of all those things. And I've found, and I've worked in all different sectors of industries before I've landed in this one as being our core of what we do. And I will tell you, and even in the most sophisticated industries, you could be working in tech for Google, there's still an HR specialist that's going to sit you down when they onboard you to explain what your benefits package is. It is very difficult to really try and navigate what retirement looks like, and even to the point of getting, I have a retirement account with Thrivent, for example, but I have a retirement specialist who still has to walk me through those things. We hire these people because we are not experts in all these things. And it's difficult. This is like doing taxes. This is difficult for even the best of people. That's why we outsource this thing. So it's also not at the forefront of people's minds. A lot of my employees are more, I mean, they're focused on their childcare, and they're focused on making sure there's food on the table. I mean, there's sort of that Maslow's hierarchy of needs that needs to be met. And unfortunately, retirement isn't one of those needs typically. So some forward-looking planning, I think, is intelligent to protect the community, because let's keep that in mind, that is what we are as a community, and looking out for one another is important. From a business perspective, of course, I have we've always had concerns, and we have our eye on this. My peers in the community that are critical of my support of it. I like to always bring them back to the idea that one of the most expensive pieces of what we have is training. When we have employee turnover, and our industry experience is higher than average employee turnover, recruiting and training is wildly expensive. In our country, this the idea of hospitality workers, servers, bartenders, even our back of house workers, are viewed, they oftentimes will view it as, we have the joke that you're not really a bartender, you're a bartender / whatever your real job that you hope to have one day is. The joke is an actor, right? You're a bartender actor, you're a server actor, you're a something else. And when in fact they actually make, a lot of my employees make more money on a per hour basis than a lot of people that view their careers. In fact, I'd almost go with most. We want to change that perspective. We want people in our industry to really start looking at what we do as a career. And a big part of where people don't view the industry as being a career path is not having a retirement plan. These employees, especially the fact that we still are, much less now so than in the past, a very much cash business. When there's cash in your pocket, they have a tendency to spend it. And that's not just true of our industry, that's kind of true everywhere. So when there's something that's really just put out to say, hey, listen, let us help manage this for you. This is going to be a pre-check deduction. It's going to go into this account. I have worked in some hospitality industries or companies even before I started my own, where we did this with insurance. We did this with some retirement programs, and there was a large participation percentage of our employees that did it, and it led to employee retention. People just didn't leave that company. The loyalty to that company is probably the best that I've seen in any company, even that I've started to this point, or that I ever worked for. And that was because you have middle-class employees working, and knowing that there is, and what's called the secure choice act for a reason, is there's some security in working in that position. So getting long-term employees, having them understand, like, hey, look, actually, if I stay in this, I can make a career out of this. And I'm actually going to have something left over in the end because somebody has helped me plan this out. Those are good things. In addition to that, it's the employees that we see when they start aging. You have to look beyond what's in front of you. It's the beauty of retirement planning. It takes long-term planning. The Secure Choice Act is a long-term plan that people have to kind of get their arms around in how this whole thing's going to work. It's the less people that are going to be dependent on government funding, whether that be welfare or a higher dependency on Social Security, your Medicare. All of those things are what we save for retirement for. So doing a little planning now, it's actually going to save everybody a lot of money down the road. And that's the piece that I really like to connect my peers with. It can be very, very conservative when it comes to government getting involved in things like this, which we all are cautious about. We don't want to have it weaponized against us. We don't want to have big fines when we do it wrong. I mean, we really worry about small employers. You talk about inclusiveness in some of our communities. You know, we as a company have worked closely just in free consulting with a lot of first generation restaurateurs that are in this state, where they just simply don't understand. We can write it in every language that's available to a state document, but the truth is that there's reading, but there's also comprehending. So being able to comprehend what's going to happen, a lot of these guys can get themselves into a spider web of issues. Suddenly fines are piling up and they don't even realize it's happening to them. So we want to be cautious about that. And there's government intervention can kind of lead to that, where we don't want to see that happen. But what we do want to see is the positive of this, that this is, yes, it's a mandate. It is really no cost to the employer. It is a volunteered piece. So there's a lot of good in here. And you're going to be able to work with your payroll company. I think there's opportunity for a lot of our local payroll companies to jump in here too, and really help pave the path for making sure that this is being reported correctly and it's done correctly. You're already doing payroll. You're usually using a payroll company. If you're not, I recommend you do, no matter what size you are. While you do, this is just a new piece of that. It's really the payroll company, the expert that needs to be the expert on this and make sure that your reporting is being done and being done correctly. So it's kind of a win for everybody. And, you know, for us, again, it's really about providing a quality of life for our employees long-term, reducing the amount of turnover that we're going to have on those employees, and us being able to invest in them so that we can build a better business at the end.
Awesome. Yeah, and I kept myself on mute because I was doing a lot of yep, yes, totally, sure. So Eric, appreciate your perspective. And for really kind of leaning into that edge that we were hoping you would share with us about if there are businesses, small, medium, large, that are watching this on replay or on the call right now that are really feeling that nervousness, kind of trying to bring to the forefront some of the really great opportunities. And yeah, as somebody that works for a chamber of commerce, I'm also really excited about the idea of just those community connective tissues with payroll companies that are hopefully like local and invested, to be able to provide that insight and feedback on the reporting and what that's going to look like, as well as just to kind of solidify and highlight again what Aaron mentioned, which is that there are a small business representative as well as one other type of local representative, an HR person that has expertise. So just really excited to see that kind of brought to the forefront from the get-go. And like we said in the beginning, and we'll reiterate it again now, is this will be a 2-year rollout process that has not started. Like Susan mentioned, this program is not allowed to begin rolling out until January 1st of 2025, but that doesn't mean that the 2-year rollout process starts then. So still kind of a long runway ahead of us, and really great to kind of get some foundation and some general information out. Shaletta, thank you for being active in the chat, seeing that you're taking some notes. So just wanted to kind of call that out again, that today's webinar is really about information and looking to the future, which seems very apt given that the topic we're talking about is retirement, which is all about planning for the future. Other folks on the call, Aaron, Mary Jo, Susan, you know, other things that you'd like to highlight from what Eric shared, or about, yeah, anything else about the act itself?
Just mention a couple of things based on what Eric shared. I think that the industry he's from is very, people might transition between jobs. And this also has a great portability feature in that you have one, regardless of the small employer you're with, you will be able to deposit it all into this one account. So it makes it simpler for the individual who's saving and less likely that they're going to distribute those funds and use them. So that's a good thing about this program. I also think it's important as employers to understand that there is support from Americans for these types of programs. So the National Institute on Retirement Security did some research both in 2020 and this year, and 77% of Americans support a state facilitated retirement program like this one. And the highest support is among millennials. So, you know, I think this could potentially, as Eric mentioned, help with retention for your team to stay working for you because this program is available.
Well, those are great remarks. And Maddie, Eric, I wanted to just thank you for really your thoughtfulness on this whole program. And it absolutely makes sense. And I was struck by, when we do have bipartisan support for our legislation, not always, but when you were talking to some of your conservative friends, you're absolutely right that down the road, not only does this help the individual so that they can retire with dignity, but we will see significant, not insignificant savings to our state budget when people won't have to rely on public programs. And again, I think Pew Research did some research that shows that from the period of 2020 to 2040, we're looking at Minnesota alone could save $5 billion. And that's just our state share. That's not even the federal share. So I really do think that's a really important selling point to people who are skeptics, because, we're going to all pay for it some way or another, right? But why not help encourage people to save? And, I'm quite confident once people start seeing the increase in their retirement account, they get excited by that and, become even better savers. And I think statistics continue to show us that people are not doing it on their own. About 5% of people save on their own, and that number has not budged for years. So I agree with Eric. I really feel like this is a win-win for, kind of all parties.
Fantastic. Well, I feel like we've covered some of the nuts and bolts. I think the foundation and a bit of the philosophy behind the program and where we're seeing that come into action through things like the board, their contractual obligation to do dedicated outreach specifically to communities that we know are impacted by not starting a retirement savings earlier in life, if at all, is really important to see. But I don't know, anybody other comments that you'd like to share? If you have any questions and you're on the call, I'd love to see those pop into the chat, because I feel like we've hit some of kind of the main bullet points, but want to see if there's anything we can kind of like, let's shade in the picture here now.
Eddie,
Yeah.
if you're all right, may I share a few statistics about Oregon Saves? I
That'd be
think
helpful.
Oregon is, it's somewhat similar in terms of demographics and population to Minnesota, and it's been around since 2017. So it's one of the first of the programs. And these are just a few facts. This is probably about 6 months or so old. There are 31,000 employers registered with Oregon Saves. The program has 323 million in assets. There are 131,000 funded accounts. So these are employees with accounts in the plan. The average monthly contribution amount is $188. The average account balance is $2,473. And the average contribution rate is 6.7%.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Mary Jo, were you going to add something?
Well, yeah, I just want to say too that, I think it will be really important too that we really help workers understand what it means to invest. And so that I am going to really just say that, from some communities, they don't trust their money in the stock market and things like that. So as we do this rollout and we do this education outreach, it is going to be really important. I know we talk about default rates and contribution rates. That's scary to workers, and so we will have to be able to get good material so somebody like Eric can make sure that it's easy to explain to the workers. But I do think once people do understand it and aren't intimidated by it, and hopefully, as you said, Aaron, you're going to create maybe some simple target date funds that are really, people don't really have to think too hard. The private company that is managing these plans is going to be doing the work for us. So I just wanted to state that just in case we have some workers on. And then just last but not least, gig workers are able to contribute to this as well. So I think that's really important, because as we see so many people going out on their own and working, that they also can contribute.
I think historically in retirement savings generally, keeping it simple is always best. People get intimidated. They don't want to think about these details, which is great that the State Board of Investment will have decision-making and oversight over some of these investment options available to these workers. I also think that inertia is a huge factor in increasing and retaining savings. So that's why the mandatory contribution amount will have to be very thoughtfully considered. Any auto escalation will also have to be thoughtfully considered so that we encourage people through inertia to stay in the program and not opt out or deplete their assets. So there's a lot of history in behavioral finance theories, which I won't bore you with, but there's a lot of data out there that will help inform the board to make sure that we are able to keep this simple, encourage people to stay without being without scaring them or being intimidating. So I'm confident that the board can do that work.
That's awesome. We had a great question from somebody in the chat asking if 1099 workers are able to participate in this program, which was going to be my question too. So thank you, Erin. Yeah, go ahead. Come on in.
I can take it, Maddie, if you'd like. So right now, the law does provide that independent contractors, 1099 workers, gig workers, will be able to participate when the board decides that they can participate. I think the fear is that if we're going to start, with employers first, and then move into some of these other, groups of people for sure. That is in the statute, and so I think it is contemplated, but it will be up to the board to open it up. I also just want to add that nonprofits are treated just like, sort of for-profit corporations. So nonprofits also are subject to the law right now.
And I just want one comment. Susan probably knows more on this, but under the Secure Choice, employers cannot offer a match. You're not allowed to under an IRA, but so that's why some employers may decide they want to open up a 401k. But I do think there are some federal laws that provide both tax savings and a bonus, a saver's credit bonus that will start, I believe, in 2026. And I don't know, Susan, if you want to speak more to that, but I think again, that will help, if people can get some matching funds and some tax breaks from this. I think that could help with the incentive to keep saving. But Susan, would you want to comment at all a little bit more on those?
So I can confirm that employers are not permitted to contribute. So if an employer wants to contribute down the road, they certainly can then open up a 401k plan and start doing matching contributions to that. But right now, under federal law, the employer is not allowed to contribute anything. I'm hesitant to really dig into any of the details on secure or on the Savers credit. There is some question about whether it'll be permitted in the case of, I believe, a Roth IRA. And on that issue, we're not sure at this point whether the board will immediately permit both Roth and traditional IRAs. So that is another decision that will be made by the board, but that will play into the question of whether the Savers credit is going to be of benefit. But I'm guessing the board will keep that in mind as it makes decisions about, Roth or traditional down the road.
There is an existing Savers credit that is a tax deduction right now. So that one exists. And the other one that I think you're mentioning, Mary George, is from Secure 2.0. And because of the delayed implementation, and the match was going to be coming from the federal government, I suspect there might be some changes to provisions of Secure 2.0. So we'll see what happens at the federal level.
Awesome. Good. Yeah, I'm glad that we got to that as well, kind of making that distinction between what type of IRA this is and just clarifying that at this point, if an employer wanted to make a contribution, they would need to open up their own 401k option that would then be managed by themselves internally using, one of these great partners in the community that offer benefits packages. So that was a question that I had too, because still learning a lot about this, right on that cusp with Gen Z and millennials. So you know, a lot of education to be done when it comes to retirement. So hopefully this call was helpful. And if you have questions, I think we'll be able to make our panelists available if there are kind of generalized questions. But I think, you know, what I can absolutely offer up is myself, which is we're really grateful for the partnership with AARP and Aaron and Susan on the call, and continue to, through the support of this bill and seeing it get passed in legislative session 2023, that we continue to, you know, just keep an eye on it. And if is information that we can provide to businesses, that it'll be available more likely than not in our weekly insider newsletter, which typically goes out on Wednesdays and or on our website. But I'm happy to make myself available as well if there are specific questions that you're really looking for. And I can share my contact information. You've probably gotten it already, and I will share it some more. I'll put my email in the chat. Just for reference, but if there aren't any other questions, I know we've got about 12 minutes left with our time, but I'm sort of just inching towards if there are any final comments from panelists. You don't all have to provide a final comment, but maybe just if you had to share a final message with our participants and people watching on playback of maybe something you're really excited about with Secure Choice Act, if you want to just clarify its purpose and mission, or just a final comment you want to share with the group. So feel free to jump in, anybody.
I can make mine very short and sweet. For now, until there is a Secure Choice website, please come to our website, which is lcpr.mn.gov. There, we will try to continue to post updates as the board, you know, works on some of these decisions. So check that for now. As soon as there's a Secure Choice website, we will put that in big bold letters on our website too, so that people can just click into that website.
Well, I'm just going to piggyback on that. This is Mary Jo. We're really excited. Of course, we're interested in, you know, pushing the board along. But I did talk to the interim executive director, and he just got his printer to work in his office. So he said, be patient, Mary Jo. And he anticipates the website might be up and running in about a couple months. So a couple months, folks. And we'd love to come back. And as this begins to launch, we'd love to do more education for employers. So thank you for having us, Maddie.
Awesome. Okay. And I saw Eric put his email in the chat as well, so we appreciate that. But yeah, just appreciate the time and the conversation, and excited to see where things go over the course of the next year, probably 3, as we look at that 2-year rollout period once we've kind of officially started. So just thanks everybody for your time. If you're on the call, we appreciate you. And if you want to share this awesome event with any of your friends or family, we'll be sending out the recording this afternoon, if not early tomorrow morning. So I think I'll close this out and just say thank you and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
day.
you.